My name is Sandra Myers. I'm 27 years old. At my sister's wedding, they gave me a name tag, not the elegant calligraphy place cards everyone else had, a gray sticker, handwritten in marker, like I was a vendor who'd wandered in by mistake. Table 14, near the restroom hallway, far from the family photos. My father had warned me the night before. Don't bring your plumber boyfriend, try not to embarrass us. My sister added, if you can't follow that one simple rule, maybe you shouldn't come at all. So I came alone. I smiled. I sat where they put me. And at 5:45 p.m., I placed a small white envelope on the gift table and walked out before the first toast. 3 hours later, my mother called screaming, "What did you tell them?" I said 6 words. Those 6 words silenced my mother completely. Before I tell you what was inside, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is there. But to understand why I did what I did, I need to take you back 6 months before that wedding. I grew up in Naperville, Illinois, about 30 miles west of Chicago. Tree-lined streets, excellent schools, houses with 3-car garages and professionally landscaped lawns. The kind of place where image isn't just important, it's everything. My father, Gerald Myers, spent 32 years as a civil engineer for the state of Illinois. Bridges, highways, infrastructure projects that took years to complete. He retired 3 years ago, but he still talks about his career at every family gathering, every dinner party, every conversation with strangers. My mother, Patricia, works part-time as a bookkeeper at First Presbyterian Church of Naperville. But her real full-time job is managing appearances. She knows everyone's business. She sits on charity boards. She organizes fundraisers and bake sales and neighborhood watch meetings. And she makes sure the Myers family always looks exactly right. Growing up, I heard the same phrase over and over. We're not rich, Sandra, but we carry ourselves like we are. Carry yourself. Dress appropriately. Speak carefully. Don't give anyone a reason to talk. The Myers family was built on image, and I learned early that my job was to protect that image, even if it meant making myself invisible. My sister Vivian is 5 years older than me. She's 32 now. Growing up, Vivian was everything I wasn't. She was confident, articulate, ambitious. She had perfect grades, perfect posture, and a perfect smile that made everyone want to be near her. She was captain of the debate team, homecoming queen, valedictorian. She got into Northwestern University on a partial scholarship and graduated from their law school in 2019. Top 10% of her class. After graduation, she clerked at a corporate firm in the Chicago Loop. Big glass building, important clients. The kind of job that made my parents glow with pride whenever they mentioned it. She dated men with strong jawlines, expensive watches, and impressive job titles. She went to charity galas and industry conferences. She got tagged in LinkedIn posts and photographed at networking events. She never embarrassed anyone. Every Thanksgiving, my father would raise his glass and say something like, "Let's toast to Vivian. Another promotion, another achievement. She's really making something of herself." Then he'd glance at me, almost as an afterthought, and add, "Sandra's doing fine too." Fine. That was always the word. Not great, not impressive, not even good. Just fine. I'm a second-grade teacher at Naperville Elementary. I've been there for 4 years. I love my job. I really do. There's something magical about watching a 7-year-old learn to read for the first time. That moment when the letters finally click. When a child realizes they can look at symbols on a page and understand what they mean. I live for those moments. But to my family, teaching was settling. It was what you did when you couldn't do something more impressive. A backup plan, not a career. Fine for other people, just not for a Myers. Once, I came home from school excited about a breakthrough with one of my students. A boy named Jalen who had struggled all year. He'd finally read an entire book out loud to the class. The other kids clapped for him. He cried. I cried. That night, I told my mother about it at dinner. She listened politely. nodded at the right moments. Then she said, "That's nice, honey. Did you hear Vivian made junior partner? She's the youngest one at her firm." She changed the subject so fast I almost got whiplash. That night, I stopped sharing. I realized something I should have understood years earlier. Some people don't want to see you. They've already decided who you are, and nothing you do will change that. So I stopped trying to change it. I stopped hoping they'd ask about my life. I just learned to survive being invisible. In the Myers family, there was always an unspoken rule. Vivian was the face of the family, the one you bragged about at church, the one you introduced at dinner parties, the one who made the Myers name mean something. And me, I was the quiet one, which really meant the one who shouldn't talk too much, the one who shouldn't stand out, the one who should smile, nod, and stay in the background while Vivian took center stage. My father never said it directly. He didn't have to. When Vivian spoke at family dinners, he leaned forward and listened. When I spoke, he checked his phone. When Vivian announced something, a promotion, a new boyfriend, a vacation, he celebrated. When I announced something, he said, "That's nice," and changed the subject. Once, when I was 23, I asked him why he never seemed interested in my life. He looked genuinely confused. "What do you mean?" he said. "I'm interested. You're doing fine, Sandra. You don't need the attention." You're doing fine. You don't need the attention. That was the unspoken rule. Vivian got the spotlight. I got the silence. And for years, I accepted it. I stopped trying to be seen. I just learned to survive being invisible. Now, before I continue, I want to ask you something. What would you do if you discovered a secret that could destroy your sister's wedding? Would you tell her, even if no one in your family believed you? Or would you stay silent to keep the peace? Think about that. Drop a comment with your answer, because that's exactly the choice I had to make. I met Dean Kowalski 2 years ago, on a Tuesday night at 11 o'clock, when the pipe under my kitchen sink exploded, water everywhere, flooding the cabinets, soaking the floor. My landlord wasn't answering. I called 4 emergency plumbers. The first 3 were either closed or booked until morning. The fourth one said they could send someone in about an hour. Dean showed up in 40 minutes. He was tall and maybe 6'2", with tired eyes, calloused hands, and a tool bag that looked like it had seen 1,000 jobs. He didn't waste time on small talk. "Show me the sink," he said. For the next hour, I watched him work. No wasted motion, no unnecessary noise. He fixed the pipe, cleaned up the water, replaced the damaged section of cabinet lining, and wiped everything down. When he finished, he handed me the invoice. I pulled out my wallet and tried to give him a tip, a 20, which was all the cash I had. He shook his head. "I quoted you fairly," he said. "Taking more would mean I didn't." I stood there confused, still holding the $20 bill. Most people would have taken the money. Dean wasn't most people. That was the first time I met someone who meant exactly what he said. Dean Kowalski is 30 years old. He owns a small business called Kowalski Plumbing and Restoration, just him and 3 employees. But before he became a plumber, he had a different career. For 3 years, right out of community college, Dean worked as a construction fraud investigator for a major insurance company in downtown Chicago. His job was to analyze claims, inspect damaged properties, and figure out when something didn't add up. He learned to spot red flags, financial inconsistencies, hidden damages, contractor kickbacks, inflated invoices. He could walk into a building and know within minutes if someone was lying about what happened there. He was good at it, really good. But he hated the office politics, the endless meetings, the bureaucracy. So after 3 years, he quit. He went back to what he knew, plumbing. Bought a used van, got his master license, started his own business. "Best decision I ever made," he told me once. "I get to work with my hands. I solve real problems. And at the end of the day, I can see exactly what I accomplished." But the skills from his old career never went away. Dean still noticed things other people missed. He still read situations like documents. He still had an instinct for when something was wrong. He once said something I'll never forget. I fix pipes for a living, but most leaks in this world aren't in the walls. At the time, I thought it was just a clever line. I didn't understand how true it was until 6 months before the wedding. The first time Dean met my family was Thanksgiving 2023. I was nervous. I'd never brought a boyfriend home before, not because I hadn't dated, but because I knew how my family operated. We arrived at my parents' house around noon. The table was set with my mother's best china. The house smelled like roasting turkey and cranberry sauce. Vivian was already there with her fiancé, Scott Brennan. Scott was everything my family wanted in a son-in-law. Tall, handsome, confident. He was wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He'd arrived in a black BMW 5 Series. He shook hands firmly, made eye contact, and complimented my mother's decorating within 30 seconds of walking through the door. "Investment banking," he said, when my father asked about his work. "Mergers and acquisitions, mostly. It's demanding, but rewarding." My father's eyes lit up. Finally, someone worth talking to. Dean was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. The contrast was immediate. My mother shook Dean's hand like she was touching something contagious. "So you're a plumber?" "Yes, ma'am. Going on 8 years now." She nodded slowly, her smile frozen. "Well, that's practical." My father didn't shake his hand at all. He just looked at Dean, grunted, and turned back to the football game. Throughout dinner, the difference was painful. When Scott spoke, everyone listened. He told stories about deals he'd closed, restaurants he'd been to, wines he'd discovered. My parents hung on every word. When Dean spoke, which wasn't often, people nodded politely and then turned back to Scott. At one point, my father asked Scott about the stock market. They talked for 20 minutes about portfolios and investments and things I didn't understand. Then my mother asked Dean, "So, do you have any hobbies?" Like plumbing was so boring, he must need something else to fill his time. Dean just smiled. "I restore old motorcycles when I have the chance." My mother blinked. "Oh, that's nice." Then she turned to Vivian and asked about the wedding venue. After dessert, Scott pulled out his phone to show my father pictures of his condo in River North. "Just upgraded to a 2-bedroom, he said. Great views of the skyline." My father was impressed. "That's a nice building. Good investment." Nobody asked where Dean lived. Nobody asked about his business. Nobody asked him anything at all. On the drive home, I apologized. Dean just shrugged. "People who've already judged you won't hear your defense," he said. "They'll just wait for you to stop talking." "Doesn't it bother you?" I asked. "The way they treated you?" He was quiet for a moment. "What bothers me?" In March 2024, Dean got a routine job order from a property management company, a high-rise rental building in River North, one of the trendiest neighborhoods in Chicago. Young professionals, luxury finishes, rooftop pool, Unit 1204, leaky pipe under the kitchen sink, standard job. Should have taken an hour. Dean told me later that he didn't know whose apartment it was until he walked in and saw a photo on the refrigerator. An engagement photo. Vivian and Scott, smiling. Perfect. Dean said he stared at it for a moment, then thought, small world. He got to work. For the first 30 minutes, everything was normal. Scott was in the living room, scrolling on his laptop, making occasional small talk. Then Scott's phone rang, and everything changed. While Dean was under the sink, replacing a corroded section of pipe, Scott stepped into the living room to take the call. But the condo was small, open floor plan, thin walls. There was no way not to hear. Scott's voice changed immediately. It went from casual to tense, from confident to desperate. "I told you, I'll pay it back. I just need more time." A pause. "No, you can't do that. I don't have it right now. I need until after the wedding." Another pause. Longer. Her family has money. Once we're married, I'll figure something out. She doesn't know. Nobody knows. Dean stopped working. He stayed completely still, barely breathing. The call went on for another 8 minutes. Scott paced back and forth, his voice rising and falling. When he finally hung up, he let out a long exhale. Then he grabbed his keys and said he needed to step out for coffee. He left Dean alone in the apartment. Dean needed Scott's signature on the invoice before he could leave. Company policy. So he waited. While he waited, he noticed something on the kitchen counter. A stack of papers, open, unguarded. Dean didn't touch them. He didn't have to. The top page was printed in bold red letters. Final notice. Collection pending. $127,000. Below that was an attorney's letter from a firm that specialized in debt recovery. The letterhead mentioned offshore betting platforms. Dean had seen documents like this before. During his fraud investigation days, he knew exactly what he was looking at. $127,000 in gambling debt. And Scott had no idea he'd just left his entire secret sitting out on the counter for a stranger to see. Because to Scott, Dean wasn't a threat. Dean was just the plumber. Scott came back 15 minutes later, coffee in hand. But when he saw Dean standing near the counter, not touching anything, just waiting, his face changed. He looked at the documents, then at Dean, then back at the documents. For 5 seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Scott laughed, the nervous kind. "Look, man," he said, "I know what this might look like. But it's not what you think. I've got a plan. I'm handling it." Dean kept his voice flat. "I'm just here for the signature." "Right, right." Scott grabbed a pen and signed the invoice quickly. Then he paused. He looked at Dean for a long moment, and he pulled out his wallet and handed Dean $200 in cash. "For your trouble," Scott said. "And, just between us, yeah? What you saw, it's under control. No reason to mention it to anyone." Dean looked at the money, then he looked at Scott. "I'm just here to fix the pipe," Dean said. He took the invoice. He didn't take the tip. As he turned to leave, he noticed something at the bottom of the invoice. Scott had written a note in his own handwriting. "Please don't mention the call. I'll make it worth your while. SB." Dean kept that invoice. Dean didn't tell me right away. He drove home, sat in his truck for 20 minutes, and thought about what to do. Part of him wanted to believe it wasn't his business. Part of him thought maybe Scott really did have a plan. But the investigator in him couldn't let it go. That night, he opened his laptop and started digging. He searched Scott Brennan's name, and what he found made everything worse. First, Scott's LinkedIn profile. It didn't say investment banker like he always claimed. It said investment analyst at Midwest Capital Partners. Analyst, not banker. Big difference. Second, a public court record from 2023. Small claims case. Scott Brennan versus a private lender. Amount, $8,200. Judgment, against Scott. Third, a betting forum. A user with a handle matching Scott's email was asking for advice on how to chase losses and recover from a bad streak. The post was dated April 2024, 1 month after Dean's visit. Scott wasn't getting better, he was getting worse. Dean took screenshots of everything. Then he sat with it for 2 more days. Some nights he came home frustrated. "Maybe I'm wrong," he'd say. "Maybe there's an explanation. Maybe it's not as bad as it looks." I started doubting too. What if Scott had already paid off the debt? What if the court case was a mistake? What if I was about to destroy my sister's life over something that was already resolved? But then Dean found the forum post, and I knew. 2 days later, he called me. "Sandra," he said, "we need to talk. It's about your sister's fiancé." He came over that night with a folder full of documents. He spread them across my kitchen table. The invoice with Scott's note, the attorney's letter, the LinkedIn screenshot, the court records, the forum posts. I sat there in silence staring at everything. $127,000, gambling debts, lies about his job, a pattern going back years, and he was about to marry my sister. Dean looked at me. "What do you want to do?" he asked. I didn't have an answer. Not yet. After Dean showed me everything, I didn't sleep for a week. Every night, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios. Should I tell Vivian directly? Show her the documents? But she'd ask where I got them, and when I said my plumber boyfriend, she'd roll her eyes and dismiss it. Should I tell my parents? Get them on my side first? But they already thought Dean was beneath them. They'd never believe anything he found. Finally, in April, I decided to try anyway. I went to my mother's house on a Saturday afternoon. She was doing a crossword puzzle at the kitchen table. "Mom," I said, "I need to talk to you about Scott." She looked up. "What about him?" "I think there's something you should know. Dean found some things that—" She cut me off immediately. "Your plumber boyfriend?" "Mom, please. Just listen." "Sandra." She put down her pen. "I'm going to say this once." She folded her hands and looked at me like I was a child who needed correcting. "Scott is a successful investment banker. He treats Vivian like a queen. He comes from a good family, and your sister is happier than I've ever seen her. But Dean saw— I don't care what Dean saw." Her voice went cold. "Whatever he thinks he found, I'm sure there's an explanation." "Mom." "No." She stood up. "I know what this is. You're jealous. You've always been jealous of Vivian. And now that she's getting married to a wonderful man, you're trying to sabotage it with gossip from a plumber who doesn't know his place." The words hit me like a slap. "That's not— We're done talking about this." She picked up her crossword. "Don't bring it up again, to me or to anyone else." She walked out of the kitchen. She didn't ask what Dean found. She didn't want to know. That night, I sat alone in my apartment for hours. Dean had gone home. The documents were still spread across my kitchen table. I didn't cry at first. I just stared at the evidence, running my fingers over the pages. And then it hit me. Not anger, not determination, just exhaustion. 27 years of being invisible. 27 years of trying to belong to a family that never made room for me. 27 years of swallowing my words because my voice didn't matter. And now I was holding proof that could destroy my sister's wedding. The sister who called me an embarrassment. The sister who said I wasn't even supposed to be invited. I started crying. Not pretty tears, the ugly kind, where your whole body shakes and you can't catch your breath. I thought about burning the documents, walking away, letting Vivian marry Scott and find out the truth on her own. Maybe that's what I deserved. To be invisible forever. Dean came back an hour later. He didn't say anything. He just sat down next to me and waited. When I finally stopped crying, he said, "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." I looked at him. "What if I'm wrong?" I whispered. "What if it's not as bad as it looks?" "It's worse," Dean said quietly. "The forum post is from last month. He's still gambling. He's still lying. And in 5 months, he's going to marry your sister." I wiped my eyes. "If I tell her now, no one will believe me." "I know. They'll say I'm jealous. They'll say I'm trying to ruin the wedding." "I know." I looked at the documents. "So I wait," I said slowly. "Until the moment when the truth can't be buried." Dean nodded. "Then we make sure the evidence is airtight," he said. "And we wait." That became our plan. I stopped trying to be heard. I decided to let the truth speak for itself, at the moment when it would matter most. Now I need to ask you something. If you were in my position, what would you have done? A. Tell Vivian immediately, even if no one believed you. B. Gather more evidence and wait for the right moment. C. Stay out of it completely. Not your marriage, not your problem. Drop your answer in the comments. I'll tell you what I chose. 3 months before the wedding in July, I got a text from Vivian. Text. Vivian. "Hey, about the bridesmaids. We finalized the dresses and your measurements don't match what's available. I think it's best if you just come as a guest. Hope you understand. I read the message 3 times. My measurements didn't match. I'd sent her my exact measurements 6 months earlier. Nothing had changed. A week later, I heard the real reason. Vivian was at a bridal brunch talking to our cousin. I was getting coffee nearby. I just want the photos to look cohesive, Vivian was saying, and Sandra's whole situation was making things complicated. My situation. That's what Dean was to them. Not a person, a situation, a problem to be managed. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for an explanation. I just texted back. Understood. Let me know if I can help with anything else. Vivian replied with a thumbs up emoji. That was it. 2 weeks before the wedding, the seating chart was emailed to the family. I found my name at the very bottom. Table 14, near the restroom hallway. Tables 1 and 2 were reserved for immediate family, parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles. I wasn't on either. I was placed with a random collection of my father's retired coworkers and a few +1s who didn't fit anywhere else. I texted my mother. Table 14, near the restrooms? Is that where I'm supposed to be? She replied 20 minutes later. The chart is already printed and sent to the venue. Don't make a fuss, it's not about you. She was right about one thing. It wasn't about me. It never was. Even though I'd been demoted from bridesmaid to bathroom-adjacent guest, I still contributed to the wedding. In August, I wrote a check for $3,500. It was my car repair fund. I'd been saving for 2 years to fix the transmission on my 2012 Honda Civic. The car had been making a grinding noise for months, but it still ran, so I kept putting off the repair. But Vivian needed help with the catering deposit. She mentioned it at a family dinner, how the costs were adding up, how the caterer needed more money up front than expected. So I offered to help. My mother took the check and said, "That's generous, Sandra. I'm sure Vivian will appreciate it." There was no thank you card, no acknowledgement in the wedding planning emails, no mention of my contribution at the bridal shower or the rehearsal dinner. A month later, at Vivian's bridal shower, I overheard her talking to a friend near the gift table. "We're paying for everything ourselves," Vivian was saying. "No help from anyone. Scott and I wanted to do it on our own." I was standing 3 feet away. She didn't even glance at me. That was the moment I realized. They didn't just overlook me, they erased me. Thursday, October 10th. The rehearsal dinner. The Ashford Estate. A private country club 30 minutes outside Chicago. Chandeliers, white tablecloths, a string quartet in the corner. I arrived alone. Navy dress. Nothing flashy. The moment I walked through the door, my father intercepted me. He pulled me into a side hallway, away from the other guests. "Sandra." His voice was low. "I hope you're not planning to bring your boyfriend tomorrow." "I'm not." "Good." He straightened his tie. "Just try to blend in. Don't draw attention to yourself." I nodded. He walked away without saying goodbye. He didn't ask how I was doing. He didn't ask about my drive. He didn't ask about anything. He just reminded me to stay invisible. After dinner, I was standing alone near a window, watching the sun set over the golf course. I heard footsteps behind me. Vivian. She wasn't smiling. "I'm only going to say this once," she said. Her voice was low but sharp. "If you can't follow one simple rule, no plumber, then don't bother coming tomorrow." I didn't respond. "You weren't even supposed to be invited," she continued. "I only sent you the invitation because Mom insisted. Dad wanted to leave you off entirely." She stepped closer. "So just don't ruin my day. That's all I ask. Show up, sit at your table, don't make a scene, and leave." 2 of her bridesmaids were standing nearby. They heard everything. Vivian looked at me, waiting for a reaction. I just looked back. "No problem," I said quietly. "Have a good night, Vivian." Then I walked away. Every cut that week was small: the texts, the seating chart, the erased contribution, the warnings, the public dismissal. But by the end of it, I was bleeding in ways no one could see. Saturday, October 12th. The wedding day. I sat in my car for 20 minutes that morning staring at the steering wheel. My hands were shaking. What if I was wrong? What if the evidence wasn't enough? What if I destroyed my sister's wedding and nothing changed? I called Dean. "I don't know if I can do this," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "You're not doing this to hurt her," he said. "You're doing it because she deserves to know who she married." "What if she hates me forever?" "She might," Dean said, "but at least she'll know the truth." I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, watching the morning light filter through the windshield. "Okay," I finally said. "Okay." I started the car. I arrived at the Ashford estate at 3:15 p.m., alone, black dress, nothing that would stand out. In my clutch, I carried a small white envelope. At the check-in table, the coordinator looked at her list, then looked at me with slight confusion. "Sandra Myers?" She shuffled through some papers. "I don't see a place card for you. Let me check." She flagged down another staff member. They whispered, shuffled more papers. Finally, she came back with a gray sticker. My name, handwritten in marker. "Table 14, she said apologetically. "It's near the restroom hallway." I looked at the sticker. Everyone else had elegant calligraphy cards. I got a sticker, like I was a vendor who'd wandered in by mistake. "Thank you," I said. I stuck it to my dress and walked inside. The ceremony started at 4 p.m. I sat in the back rows, row 12, while my parents, aunts, uncles, and grandparents filled rows 1 through 3. Vivian walked down the aisle in a $12,000 dress, glowing like she was born for this moment. Scott stood at the altar, smiling like a man without secrets. My parents sat in the front row, dabbing their eyes with embroidered handkerchiefs. No one looked back at me. No one knew where I was sitting. I watched everyone celebrate a future built on lies. And I said nothing. Not yet. The reception started at 5 p.m. I sat at table 14 with strangers, making small talk with people I'd never see again. At 5:30 I excused myself. I walked to the gift table, covered in elegant boxes wrapped in white and gold, surrounded by envelopes with calligraphy. I placed my envelope in the center, not hidden, not buried, right in the middle, where it would be seen. The front said, "For Vivian, with love, Sandra." I stepped back. Then I turned and walked toward the exit. At 5:45 p.m., I walked out of the Ashford estate. No one from table 14 noticed. No one from my family looked my way. I stepped outside, called an Uber, and waited in the parking lot. The air was cool. October evening. The sun was starting to set. My phone buzzed. Text. Dean. Done? Text. Sandra. Done. Text. Dean. How do you feel? I thought about it, watched the estate through the windows, the chandeliers, the champagne, the dancing. Text. Sandra. Free. Text. Dean. Come home, I'll make pasta. I didn't make a scene. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked out and left the truth on the table. Before I tell you what was in that envelope, I want to pause here, because this was the moment of no return. Everything I'd been building toward, every document, every screenshot, every piece of evidence, was sitting on that gift table, and I had no idea what would happen next. The envelope contained 3 things. The first was a handwritten card, simple cream paper, no decorations. "Dear Vivian, I tried to tell Mom in April. She said I was jealous. I knew if I said anything at the wedding, you'd think the same thing. So I'm telling you in writing. Please read everything before you decide what to do. I hope I'm wrong about all of this. But if I'm right, you deserve to know. With love, Sandra." The card was gentle. What came next was not. The second item was a photocopy of Dean's work invoice. Date: March 15th, 2024. Address: Unit 1204, River North, Chicago. Client: Scott Brennan. Service: Kitchen sink repair, $285. At the bottom, in Scott's own handwriting, please don't mention the call. I'll make it worth your while. SB. Attached was a note from me. Dean did a repair job at Scott's apartment. While he was there, he overheard a phone call about debt. This is what Scott wrote when he realized Dean had heard. The invoice was context. The real evidence came next. The third layer was the evidence packet. First, a photocopy of the attorney's letter from February 2024, addressed to Scott Brennan. Amount owed, $127,000. Source, offshore sports betting platform. Status, final notice before legal action. Second, a screenshot of Scott's LinkedIn profile. Job title, investment analyst at Midwest Capital Partners, not investment banker like he always claimed. Third, a public court record from 2023, Scott Brennan versus a private lender. Amount, $8,200. Judgment, against Scott. Fourth, a screenshot from a betting forum. A user with Scott's email handle, dated April 2024, asking for advice on how to chase losses. And finally, one last note. I didn't want to believe it either, but I couldn't let you walk into this marriage without knowing. What you do with this information is your choice. Sandra. I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't demand she cancel the wedding. I just gave her the truth. What she did with it was up to her. After dinner, Vivian went to the bridal suite to freshen up before the cake cutting. Her maid of honor, Megan, went with her. On the vanity, the coordinator had placed a few small gifts, including a white envelope marked "For Vivian," with love, Sandra. Megan told me later what happened. Vivian picked up the envelope with a curious expression. "Sandra?" she murmured. "What did she—" She opened the card, read it, read it again. Then she pulled out the other documents. Megan said Vivian's hands started shaking. The color drained from her face. She flipped through the pages faster and faster. Then she stopped. For a long moment, she just stared. Then she whispered, "No, no, no, no." Megan asked what was wrong. Vivian didn't answer. She just grabbed the documents and walked out. Vivian found Scott at the bar, laughing with his groomsmen. She tapped his shoulder. "We need to talk, now." The smile on Scott's face flickered when he saw her expression. She led him into the hallway behind the ballroom. Megan followed at a distance. Vivian held up the documents. "Is this real?" Scott looked at the papers. His face went through several expressions: confusion, fear, forced calm. "What are you— Is this real?" 5 seconds of silence. "Babe, I can explain." $127,000, Scott. Gambling. Is it real? Another pause. It's not as bad as it looks. I have a plan. I was going to tell you after the honeymoon." "After the honeymoon?" Vivian's voice cracked. "We got married 3 hours ago." "I know, but your family has money. We can work this out together." Vivian slapped him. The sound echoed down the hallway. "My family's money?" she whispered. "You married me for my family's money?" "No, that's not— Get away from me!" She turned and walked back toward the ballroom. Scott stood alone in the hallway, his cheek red, his world crumbling. The coordinator was called. "Family emergency, private room, now." Cake cutting was delayed. In a small conference room, the families gathered. Vivian spread the documents on the table. "Read them," she said. "All of you." 2 minutes of silence. Paper rustling, pages turning. Scott's father, Edmund Brennan, who had spent the reception bragging about his son, the investment banker, sat down slowly. His face went gray. Scott's mother started crying. My mother looked at the documents, then at Vivian. "Where did you get these?" Vivian's voice was ice. "Sandra." "Sandra?" My mother's eyes widened. "Your sister Sandra?" "Yes. The sister who tried to warn you in April, remember? You told her she was jealous. The room went silent. My mother opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. For once, she had nothing to say. After 25 minutes of chaos, a decision was made. They would continue the reception. Why? Because 280 guests were waiting. The caterers had been paid, the photos had been taken, and a public cancellation would be worse than a private disaster. At 9:50 p.m., Vivian and Scott emerged. They walked to the cake table, picked up the knife, smiled for the cameras. But Megan told me. Vivian's eyes were completely empty. She was performing. The marriage was over before she cut the first slice. Before they walked out, Vivian whispered to Scott, "We're going to finish this reception. We're going to smile. And tomorrow, you're going to explain exactly how you plan to use my family to pay your debts." Scott didn't respond. He just nodded. You can't hide chaos at a 280-person wedding. One of Scott's groomsmen noticed him getting pulled into the hallway. Noticed Vivian's face when she came back. He asked questions, heard fragments through the conference room door. Gambling. 100,000. Lied about his job. By 10 p.m., at least 40 guests had heard some version of the story. Some left early, making excuses about babysitters and early flights. Others stayed, whispering behind champagne glasses. The perfect wedding was unraveling, one rumor at a time. I was on my couch with Dean eating pasta when my phone rang. Caller ID. Mom. I answered. No hello, just screaming. What did you tell them? What did you do? I kept my voice calm. I didn't tell them anything. Don't lie to me. I'm not lying. I left Vivian a gift, that's all. You ruined her wedding. You humiliated our entire family. I took a breath. Then I said 6 words. I told you back in April. Silence, complete silence. You said I was jealous, I continued. You said Dean didn't know his place. You didn't want to hear the truth. More silence. So I stopped trying to tell you, and I let the evidence speak for itself. My mother's voice was different now, smaller. Sandra. Good night, Mom. I hung up. Dean looked at me. You okay? I thought about it. Yeah, I said. I think I finally am. The week after the wedding, my phone became a battlefield. 27 missed calls from my mother, 14 from my father, 0 from Vivian. The voicemails ranged from furious to desperate. Voicemail, Mom, day 2. Call me back, now. Voicemail, Mom, day 3. Vivian can't stop crying. The Brennans are furious. Everyone at church is asking what happened. Are you satisfied? Voicemail, Dad, day 4. What you did was unforgivable. You need to apologize. I didn't call back. I blocked their numbers temporarily. I went to work. I taught my students. I came home to Dean. I lived my life. Because for me, the hard part was already over. On day 9, I got an unexpected message. Instagram DM from Megan, Vivian's maid of honor. DM. Megan. I know everyone is blaming you, but I was in that room. I saw the documents. I saw Scott's face when he couldn't explain. Another message. DM. Megan. I told Vivian 6 months ago that something felt off about Scott. She said I was paranoid. She said I was jealous. Then. DM. Megan. You were the only one brave enough to prove it. Vivian isn't ready to hear that yet, but someday she will. Thank you. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed, "Thank you for telling me. It means more than you know." Megan's words didn't fix anything, but they reminded me I wasn't crazy. 1 month after the wedding, I heard from my Aunt Deborah, the only family member still speaking to me. Vivian had decided to stay with Scott. She says he's getting help, Aunt Deborah told me, working with a financial advisor. She believes he can change. I was quiet. She also said she can't talk to you right now, Aunt Deborah continued. Seeing you reminds her of that night. I understand, I said. Do you want me to tell her anything? I thought about it. No. When she's ready, she knows where to find me. January 2025. Vivian filed for divorce. Scott hadn't changed. He'd gotten worse. In December, he relapsed, placed another $22,000 in bets, chasing the same losses he'd been chasing for years. Vivian found out on Christmas Eve when the credit card statement arrived. She moved out 3 days later. 2 weeks after filing, she called me, first time in 3 months. Sandra. Her voice was tired, hollow. Vivian? Long pause. You were right, she said finally. About everything. I should have listened. I didn't say I told you so. I said, I'm sorry it happened this way. Another pause. Can we talk? Sometime? I know I have no right to ask. I thought about everything. The years of being overlooked. Table 14. The bridesmaid cut. The words she'd said at the rehearsal dinner. Sometime, I said. But not today. I need time too. Okay. Her voice was small. I understand. We hung up. I didn't hate her. But I also didn't owe her forgiveness on her schedule. It's late February 2025 now. I'm sitting in my apartment, a new place, a little bigger, with windows that catch the afternoon light. Dean is in the kitchen making pasta. It's Friday. That's our tradition. My mother calls once a month now. The conversations are short, surface level. We don't talk about the wedding, we don't talk about Scott. My father hasn't called since October, but last week I got something in the mail. A card. From Vivian. Not a text. A real card. Inside, she'd written, I'm sorry for table 14. I'm sorry for the bridesmaid dress. I'm sorry for saying you weren't supposed to be invited. You deserved better than how I treated you. V. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something. I put the card on my refrigerator, next to a photo of me and Dean at my school's winter concert. My students had made me a banner that said Best Teacher Ever, in crooked, colorful letters. That's my life now. Small moments, real people, pasta on Fridays, pasta, and a card from a sister who's finally learning to see me. I don't know if Vivian will ever fully forgive me. I don't know if my parents will ever see me differently. But I know this. I am done waiting to be seen by people who refuse to look. I am done apologizing for telling the truth. I am done shrinking myself to fit into a family portrait that never had room for me. Dean walks into the living room with 2 plates of pasta. You okay? He asks. I look at him. This man they called an embarrassment. This man they banned from the wedding. This man who saw what no one else wanted to see. Yeah, I say. I'm okay. They told me not to bring my plumber boyfriend. They didn't know he was the only one who saw the truth. They didn't know I was the only one brave enough to tell it. I'm not the sister who ruined a wedding. I'm the sister who refused to let a lie become a marriage. Vivian is free now. She doesn't fully know it yet. But she will, and so am I. Some people spend their whole lives waiting to be seen by the people who raised them. I stopped waiting. I started living, and I've made my peace with that. If you're still here, thank you. This wasn't an easy story to tell, but I know I'm not the only one who's been through something like this. Maybe you're the quiet one in your family. Maybe you've been overlooked, erased, or told to stay in the background. Maybe you're holding a truth right now that no one wants to hear. If that's you, I see you. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and telling the truth? What did you choose? I read every single comment. I'd love to hear your story. If this resonated with you, hit subscribe. I share stories like this every week. Stories about family, boundaries, and finding your voice. Thank you for listening. This was my story, but maybe, in some way, it's yours too.
Do you know the car I'm talking about? It's got like a a handle to steer the front wheels.
Keep left.
Quite literally look like some sort of a horseless carriage, you know.
Keep left.
The Daimler family have been accusing Benz of stealing Daimler's blueprints ever since. Really? Wow. They didn't talk about that when Mercedes-Benz.